title of this panel is supposed to be, what have we now learned since the last time we met? I want to change that to, what have we now learned in the last 24 hours? Because things are changing so rapidly. And if we take a look at just the financial aspects of things, the numbers are somewhat interesting. You have on the airline level, you have major U.S. airlines cutting their earnings projections for this quarter by a half. You see a huge drop-off in international travel to the United States of an average of about 22% in the last 5 weeks. You see from Canada 40%. And you see a proposal by the President of the United States to ban travel for citizens of 43 countries to the United States. So let's take a look at some of those numbers, because when I was talking to you earlier, Thomas, you said, even with those numbers, as scary as they are, your numbers are holding up.
Yeah. So, I know you're a man of numbers, so let's use numbers to answer that question. First of all, in 2024, it's only a couple of months ago, we did another record year. If I just take PME Americas, which is the economy, mid-scale, and premium brands, we increased our RevPAR by 11%. That's a fact. As I'm not allowed to talk, about the results in the beginning of the year, but let me give you a glimpse. I can tell you that for the first 2 months, we've even improved our RevPAR compared to last year. And the good thing is, and I'll link it to your question on the airlines. The good thing is that for the past 4 years, our RevPAR was mainly driven by rate for 85, 95% more or less. What we're seeing in the past 4 months is that the demand is also increasing. So our occupancy rate, I could say, as from 25, is already above 2019. So our RevPAR is no longer driven just by rate, but also by demand. The second number, which I think is important, as much as we like international flows, but if you look at the main players, and I'll just speak for Accor, 70% or 75% of our business is still domestic. I mean, that doesn't mean they don't need airplanes, but at least they don't need these, I would say, international flows. So taking those statistics so far, we're not seeing any impact, but let's not be stupid. There are geopolitical situations happening across the world, so we need to be vigilant, and that's what we are. But so far, we're good.
Ron, I see you nodding your head with Thomas's statement there. Do you agree with him?
First thing that comes to mind is, because we're a private company, we don't have to report anything. So that helps. But I completely agree with what Thomas said. 2024 was a record year for us, both not only from a revenue generation to hotels, but also financially in our balance sheet. So, at the end of the day, we're in a resilient industry, and really confident that while 2025 might not repeat 2024, and I doubt that it will, it's still a very strong global economy, and again, highly affected by domestic, while we will see, I think, some increase in outbound travel from U.S. Again in 2025.
Are you saying, this is for both you and Thomas, that the demand dimensions now, in terms of definition, have changed to the point where it's almost exclusive of what's going on in the rest of the world, because people have made choices that they're not going to let travel get in the way, meaning the economy getting in the way or geopolitical situations getting in the way? I mean, what I was surprised about earlier this year, by the way, earlier this year was just 2 weeks ago, when we discovered that in the cruise industry, they've already sold 80% of their inventory for 2025 and into 26 already. I mean, did that surprise anybody here? Gustavo?
That's interesting, but I would like to go back to your first topic. I believe that for Latin American, what you are mentioning are good news, because we are here in Latin America. If the United States doesn't want our guests, there will be people traveling around our hotels in our region. So the numbers that I see in Latin America are extremely positive, and mainly in this country, in Brazil, in which, 85, 90% of the travelers are Brazilians. So I understand what's happening in the United States, but sometimes here in Latin America, we face other realities and mainly other type of challenges.
But the thing is, if you're set up already, as Thomas said, for so much of your traffic being regional and local, then you're somewhat immune from this.
Yeah, you're right.
Have the passenger, or I should say guest dimensions changed, their behavior changed? Are they expecting different things now than they were, let's say, 3 years ago? Bujan?
We definitely see some changes in the customer's behavior. I would definitely say, for example, seasonality. We see a much shorter booking windows. We also see a shorter trips. People would take the leisure trips, or people would take these long weekends and go to the closer destinations. If we're talking about the US travelers, they're still booking trips to the Caribbean. Our hotels, all-inclusive hotels in Dominican Republic and Mexico, are having a great occupancy. Another trend that we have seen also is, for example, with the FX, right? Especially in the US, with the US travelers, they're traveling more outside because of the positive FX change, right? Because the dollar is stronger, so they can get more for their buck when they travel outside. On the other side, in countries such as Brazil, we definitely see more domestic travelers, and that would be an impact of the FX, and also the Brazilians, they also want to discover their own country. So what we have been doing is really focusing on providing really the experience and the product that's going to meet the local needs.
You just mentioned seasonality. I would like to project maybe that seasonality is just going away. Yes, you agree?
Yeah, there's many things that are going away. Okay, so I like to touch on the experience because it's such a big word. And I want to, on the point that you're saying the stays are shorter, etc. We're seeing something different actually, where and it might be linked with two things. Number one,
was he talking about booking window or length of stay?
I'm talking about the booking window. Yes, in our all-inclusive we have a longer stay, but for example, in some of these closer destinations, we see also the shorter stay. Especially for a long and extended weekend, they're booking more often, and they're staying like shorter. So instead of using their vacation and staying 2 or 3 weeks, one vacation a year, they do like multiple vacations, 4 or 5 vacations, and they stay shorter.
Yeah. So probably, for years we've been talking about 3 main segments, and I'll bridge to your question. We talked about leisure segment, we talk about corporate segment, we go about my segment. I think we should start thinking about one new segment. Okay. And I know we've talked about leisure a long time, but it is absolutely here because our guests, whether he comes for leisure or she comes for leisure or for business or for MICE, they're mixing. They're mixing basically the reason why they go somewhere. A very perfect example. Last week, my president came all the way from Paris for a 1-hour intervention in Lima. That's 11-hour flights. You don't want to know how much carbon emission that is, yeah? But that is 11-hour flights for 1 hour. What did he do? He came for 10 days. He took 8 days on holidays with his wife, and he said, as I'm here now, I'm going to take the opportunity to that 1 hour. And we're seeing...
he's president.
Yeah, but hang on. We're seeing more, I'm sure many people here in this room also. There's many examples of people going to a convention, but now combining it with, why not discover? I mean, you're a good example. If I'm not wrong, you're here with your wife.
I am.
No? So, I mean, you could have come alone. You could have done your 2-hour sessions.
I couldn't.
You couldn't, yeah. So, I think blurring the segments is what's happening in our business. And a second point I would like to highlight, and this is something we need to look forwards, because we talk a lot about the past, but let's look about the future. And I heard many panels, great panels on investors and different kind of investors and etc. But who decides of the growth and the future in our business? Is it the investors or is it the guest? I would say it's the guest. Okay, it's the guest who's going to choose where he's going to go, and is the guest who's going to choose in what hotel he's going to stay in what segment. Now there's one given which is important. We're roughly 8.5 billion people in the world, correct? Something like that. This is going to grow. It continues growing. By 2030, more than 50% is going to be in the mid class. 50%. It's the most and the fastest growing segment and spenders for the coming years. That means if you think about experience and you think about brands and how we're going to have to develop, the bulk of the business in the future is going to be mid-scale, upscale, and premium. The second demographic, which is important, yeah, I think some of us are part of that. It's the aging of the population, okay? But they're getting healthier and they're getting wealthier. So they're also going to want to travel more and more. Yeah? And as some people might say, instead of keeping their money on the bank and giving it to their children, they want to spend it themselves. And then the third one, which is important, is the younger generation. And each one of these segments is, and we can see that also in the growth of the travelers. In 2019, we were at 1.4 billion. This year, we're going to be at 1.5. And the demand is growing by 4 to 5%. So you mix that all up, the mid-class, the aging population, the younger, and this is where our investors need to focus on.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, today we have 5 generations of travelers. We've never had that before. To Thomas's point, the baby boomers, we're traveling as long as we can, but we are transitioning that wealth down through the generations. But beyond the multi-generational, by the different generations of travelers, we also have multi-generational travel where they're traveling together today. And I think that's a short-term demand that we're seeing of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms being booked at a time because they're taking a trip, if not staying in a condo or somewhere else. We're seeing how they're changing what that experience needs to be like. And we need to be able to adapt to that to be able to accommodate what their expectations are. To the very other end of that is we're seeing a lot of solo travelers. And that sets a completely different expectation, whether it's to rejuvenate, reset, wellness, whatever the case may be. And especially as we lean into the upper upscale and luxury segment, that creates a different expectation. And the one last point that I will say with regard to wealth is that 35% of luxury travelers today have less than $1 million net worth. So they're not going to always spend the most amount of money during the course of their stay. They will pick the times when they're going to expend.
Or they're spending money that they otherwise would have spent for a car, clothing.
Absolutely.
They've moved that bucket over.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Andreas.
Yeah, something I wanted to add is, you know, as Thomas was saying, there is a change, a significant change in the demographics of the guests. And what we are seeing, you know, we are an operator. We run hotels for most of these guys. And what's becoming a little bit of a challenge in this world of a proliferation of brands is how do you pick the right brands for the hotels, right? Because you're having a very significant number of segments, a very significant number of brands, and not only, you know, the traditional brands, but now the soft brands. So investors, many of whom are sitting here, sit and call us and say, what do I do? What's the brand? It used to be a simple, you know, selection among a few brands. Now it's becoming very complicated. So how's that going to play out to the extent, I mean, in a world where more and more brands are coming into the, you know, the available brand portfolio for new hotels? It's going to be a very interesting question. How are, you know, this guy is going to be able to position brands and differentiate among them, you know, and not start diluting the brand equity of the different brands? I think that's going to be a very interesting question.
I think the question is happening already.
Exactly.
I think, go on.
No, I was going to say, you know, for example, when we're talking about these segments, you know, the wellness, and, you know, you've mentioned the wellness, you know, we looked at the numbers, and there is, it is actually, in 2027, it's going to be $1.4 trillion industry, like segment. So we are definitely looking and going after the wellness. You know, we have the wellness brand that we identified. You know, we're identifying, you know, the wellness, you know, locations. It's all about, you know, getting healthy, you know, eating healthy, living healthy. You know, but again, it is, you know, something that, you know, we're going to see more and more, and, you know, not just the Marriott, but other chains really focusing on the wellness. And what I haven't mentioned is also the sports and event. You know, that's also a growing segment that we've seen. And currently,
well, we saw last year, 27% of the people who attended concerts flew in for it.
Absolutely.
The Taylor Swift effect.
Yeah, it is currently, I believe the stats for 2024 is that it is, you know, $55 billion segment that we already have, the events and the sports.
But I want to go back to something you just said, because it reminds you of the old days of the health club at a hotel. Right, the old days that, you know, they defined a health club by knocking out 2 walls of a room and throwing in a Jane Fonda tape and saying, we have a health club. Now the word is wellness. We're doing different buzzwords. But now I don't want to pin you down, but I will. What's your definition of a wellness hotel? Because it has a different definition to everybody on this stage, I believe. And then how do you then brand the hotel to deliver the service you think they want?
Well, and that's, you know, it is the direction that the industry is going to go to. It might be niche today, but it has tremendous potential. We signed our first wellness hotel outside of Mexico City just a couple months ago, and it is a 3, 5, 7-day stay for the most part, and you're entrenched in the entire lifestyle change of what.
And the food portions are very small.
Well, they're certainly healthier, but it's a mental mindset, it's a physical mindset, and one of the statistics is that 73% of aging people say they will be healthier 5 years from now than what they are today. So that gives us an idea of what the direction is going to be and how they want to extend and live a quality of life longer term. So we've launched the wellness type hotel, but also an option to that is, how do I convert a hotel that has a spa into a wellness facility? Because it is tremendously different. Doctors on staff, therapy on staff, and how you actually attract and make known that this is a different type of experience.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, we have two divisions with the PME, Premium Economy, and with Deluxe and Lifestyle. We have many hotels with wellness, etc. But I would like to elevate this a little bit when you talk about wellness, because it's far more than a spa and then a great a swimming pool and massages and using the right products. 80% of travelers are saying today, and this is not an Accor study, this is an external study, 80% of travelers are saying they want to travel more sustainable. That is number one, more sustainable to get where I need to go. And once I'm there, I want to have a hotel which can have proof points that it is sustainable on every single experience of the stay of the hotel. And the second one is probably for all investors here in the room, even more important than for us hoteliers, is that about 50% of them are willing to pay more. Yeah, and this is more and more the younger generation coming up, because as you rightly say, they have a very different view than the older generation, but they're willing to pay more, and not only for a wellness center, but to see that they have a well-balanced menu, to see that the hotels have incorporated the local community. It goes much further than that. And this is going at a speed that you cannot imagine. So if today, as a hotelier, you don't have proof points that you're investing in ESG, that you're getting rid of the plastic, that you're working on decarbonization, that you have an eco certificate, that you have well-balanced and healthy food on your menu, I mean, and the list goes on, you're going to struggle.
When the pandemic happened, I figured, okay, sustainability is dead now because it's all going to be focused on cost when they try to recover. Boy, was I wrong. It came back even bigger. Gustavo?
Yeah, no. Sustainability has both sides. There is a cost-saving side, but a revenue generator side. As Thomas mentioned, new generations are willing to pay more for a sustainability hotel. The RFP process, if you are not part of a sustainability program, you are out of that RFP. So now sustainability is impacting both revenue and cost. And sorry, I would like to go back again to one topic. You have been talking about wellness. I believe that wellness, ESG, is all under the umbrella of something that you mentioned, experiences. New generations are looking for experiences. They prefer to spend money in experiences rather than cars and houses. Gen Z and millennials are here. They are more than the half of our population and a growing population. I believe that that is the focus for the future. And it's hard to understand because they are changing their behaviors as we speak.
Well, you know, we talk about jet setting. How about set jetting? What we're seeing right now in Thailand, the effect of what? White Lotus on their tourism is wild. Or Emily in Paris.
I have to, for the sake of my president, which is French, of course, and which is living in Paris, yeah. I'll give you one very concrete example. Unfortunately, you all know that the cathedral in Paris, the Notre Dame, had a big fire, I think it's 4 years ago. And it actually reopened at the end of last year. It already had 2 million foreign visitors just to visit the cathedral. But most of them stayed 3 or 4 weeks, 4 days. And a second example I want to give you is quite interesting. I was in Peru last week. And we were invited by the Minister of Tourism. And the Minister of Tourism said, Thomas, what is your ambition in Peru? And I said, what do you mean? I said, well, how many hotels do you have today? I said, we have 12, 13, 14, something like that. And I said, our ambition is, 30. But then I asked her a question. I said, what is the number one reason that people go to Peru? 9 out of 10 are going to say Machu Picchu. You agree with me? 9 out of 10. The thing is that there's so much more to see in Peru than that the archaeological Machu Picchu. And they've actually put a cap. So I said to them, well, I'm happy to develop hotels. But if you're not going to create other attractions in this country, and then she stopped me immediately, and she showed me a whole map of Peru of a whole bunch of archaeological sites that nobody has ever seen in their life. So what they're doing now, and this is also to go against what we call the over-tourism, too many people going to the same place. So what they're doing and what these countries have to do, and which will help us also as a hotelier or an investor, is find other destinations. I'll give the best example when I arrived 4 years ago here in Brazil. Of course I came to Rio. But you know what my second visit was? Pantanal. Bonito. Brazilians here, I'm sure you know it. It is a beautiful place. It's beautiful nature. But unfortunately, it doesn't have enough hotels, got beautiful posadas. So I would say there is a work to be done between governments and ourselves. Create new destinations. Avoid this tourism in this destination we already go. Find attractive places. And I think this is where the magic is of our business.
Well, looking at, oh, sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Well, and what you're somewhat describing is what I would say is adventure travel now. It's not the experiences, it's actually, I want something off the beaten path.
You want
I want
contrarian
secondary, tertiary markets.
What I mean by that goes back to seasonality, using Europe as a model. I mean, if you took a look last year in Athens, 30,000 people a day in 100-degree Fahrenheit weather trying to climb up to the Acropolis. That wasn't just over-tourism, that was a medical emergency, right? The government's decision was, we're going to fix that by limiting it to 20,000 people a day. That's not going to save anything. And yet, look what we just saw with the cruise industry. Just over the past 6 months, they're now sailing ships in the Mediterranean in December. No lines, nobody firing water cannons from angry locals in Barcelona, right? And people are having a great idea, they're having a great experience, so that the whole idea of seasonality is what you're talking about, off-season, really helps you, even in terms of your development. Pujan?
We've seen also, for example, going to sustainability, right? We've talked about the, what do we do with our hotels? What are the benefits? I think we haven't mentioned really that, large corporations as well, they have, their sustainability goals. Like, Marriott does, the large corporation also have their sustainability goals. And it's very important to take this into consideration because when they're booking the meetings, they're looking for these certifications. And, there are different certifications that, we have today in the industry, which is, quite important that, we check all of these boxes if we want to get some of this business from the large groups. We also spoke about, these new destinations. Yes. I know that, for example, there were questions, and I received also so many questions. Aren't there, too many brands? And I always say, you know what? It depends. As long as you grow demand, you can actually create a new brand. For example,
but can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question about that? I was at a travel conference a couple of years ago, industry conference, and I said, "Can somebody here tell me how many brands Marriott has?" And one person raised their hand. I said, "Let me guess. You work for Marriott?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Could you name them?" And he did. And applause. And then I said, "Okay, now can you differentiate them?" And there was a long pause in the room. So the real question is, it's rhetorical perhaps, are we reaching that moment of diminishing returns with too many brands?
So again, we do have over 30 brands. And
I'm not going to make you name them.
I can name them all. But we have over 30 brands. But, all of these brands are not, in the same market. For example, we don't have 30 brands in the Caribbean and Latin America. We have some of the regional brands, for example, like Protea in Sub-Saharan Africa. That brand was never exported outside of Africa. So, we look at, these new brands that, it has to be a demand for that brand. So, for example, we were not competing in the mid-scale, so we decided to purchase the City Express. So yes, it's a new brand that comes with, 5 sub-brands, right? City Express Junior, City Express Plus, City Express Suites, right? Because, there might not be a need in a certain market, especially if you go to secondary market in Brazil, to go with the Residence Inn. City Express, we actually put everything under one bucket. It helps us obviously with the with the marketing dollars as well, because everything is under one brand. And you offer the extended stay product. So again, I think it's irrelevant. I think it's more about the demand. If there is a demand for a certain niche or a certain segment, sure, we might add another brand.
Okay, so for Gustavo and Andreas, a question for you, and that is, with forgetting the branding, in terms of the type of hotels, are you seeing a new entrant or more focus, let's say, on all-inclusive?
Yeah, all-inclusive, it's here to stay. We used to have, in the past, all-inclusive as a single product, and now we see different types. So inside the all-inclusive space, different type of all-inclusive. Again, talking about new generations, they love the simplicity of the all-inclusive, one single solution, everything resolved. And in an all-inclusive, in a huge resort, it's easier to deliver an experience rather than a city hotel. So through a wellness center, sports, different areas. So it's something that started many years ago. I believe that the pandemic speed up the process, and it's something that will remain in the future.
Andreas?
Yeah, we're seeing that definitely. We started operating one of Colombia's biggest all-inclusive resorts last year, so it's clearly a trend. You see it, all the brands are investing in the all-inclusive sector. I do want to go back to a couple of things that we were discussing about sustainability on the one hand and experiences on the other. And I think, us as operators are going to have to work closely with the brands, because there is a lot of talk about experiences and sustainability and the standards. But when the rubber meets the road, it's not that clear what the incentives are for the owners to do that extra investment on the sustainability. What's the incentive for the owners to stop just selling rooms and start selling experiences? So I think there's going to have to be a lot of work, with brand companies, like all of these guys, and operators like ourselves. We're going to have to, in most cases, because we've been hearing that all day, 85% plus of new projects are franchises, to really push those topics. Otherwise, it's going to end up, being ideas and trends. But how do we translate that into the actual experience? How do we translate that into the actual hotels themselves? And how do those translate into real brand equity, not going down the path, which I do believe we're going down that path of diminishing returns on the brand differentiation as much as we can increase demand.
How do you educate the owners?
Exactly. And are they going to be compensated somehow, by all of us? And I include myself, right? What's the management company gonna put in the pot for sustainability efforts? What's the owner? What are the brands gonna put? In practice, not in theory, but in practice. Are we all gonna cash in a little bit? Are we gonna cash in on those experiences? Are we not gonna work together to really develop those that community hotel interaction? It's a lot of work. And again, 85% plus of hotels are starting to be franchises. So it's really going to have to involve a lot of people. And we tend to think at GHL that we are, sustainability is at the top of our priorities. And so is, the integration with communities. But how do you really get that working? How do you make it sustainable? And how do you really, have the owners, the brands, and the operators pitch in to really make it sustainable? I think that's a very interesting long-term question.
Did you have something to say?
I'm fully aligned with what you say. At the end of the day, our business is all about three main stakeholders. It's first our guest, because if you have no guests, well, you're not going to have any investors. And I actually should say first our people, because you don't have people delivering great service, you won't have a guest. You don't have a guest, you don't have an investor. But I think when you said we should educate the investors, it's a two-way street. We need to understand, as operators, as brand owners, as franchisers, we need to understand how an investor is thinking. Yeah, we need to understand if it's a long-term investor, if it's a short-term investor. I mean, all these facets. We need to make sure that we have a win-win situation. And you're right. I mean, the costs are increasing, the inflation is increasing, capex is in. All these impacts for our investors Are we finding solutions? Are we working together? Yes, we're working together. We have a big procurement platform. One of the main topics on our agenda now is certainly in certain countries trying to stimulate green energy. Brazil is a great example of that. It's probably got the most green energy in the world. And the more of the hotels that buy into this free green energy, we already see a reduction up to 20% of their energy costs. So there is things that we do on our side, not to tell them, okay, you need to control the carbon emission. Yes, but however, we're going to help you here to reduce your costs. And just on the brands, because you asked me that question 2 years ago also. You said, how many brands do you have? And I've probably at that time 35. We'll figure it out. We've got 47 now, okay? So, and will we have 48 tomorrow? Very probable. Will we have 50? It's very possible. The thing is that our company, and whatever it's Accor or anyone, we need to make sure that we split the cake. And by splitting the cake, it makes it a bit more simple to differentiate the different brands. So hence why we took the decision to create 2 divisions. You have people that are focused on the economy hotels, all the way from sales and procurement and marketing and pricing. I don't want to go into the detail. You have people and teams focused on the mid-scale, people on the premium, people on the luxe and on the lifestyle. We have a separate platform with Ennismore. We have a platform specialized in residences, and we have a platform specialized in resort hotels or all-in, because they're all explicit and may need to make sure that, as from a point of an investor point, and from a guest experience, and from an employee, we don't dilute those brands. So when you cut up the cake, things become more understandable.
I would like to add that from an operator perspective, we're doing something very similar. You know, we recognize that the type of people, it's not only the standards, right? It's the type of people, the type of suppliers, the type of experiences that you have to offer, the way you communicate, the way you sell, the way you commercialize the hotels is so different that we're trying to split the cake exactly because of that. So we're trying to, in a way, reflect what what the bigger companies are doing to try to adapt and be coherent, with that same splitting. I think it's very smart and necessary.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and we have done something similar with our luxury division and with our all-inclusive division. We practically split those because it's a different way of selling. Like selling an all-inclusive, it's not the way as selling the EP hotels. So you have to understand really the business in order to be able to sell properly the all-inclusive.
I keep telling all my friends, when you go into a Lexus dealership, you never hear the word Toyota. I mean, it's just not done that way. But in terms of brand definition, I want to talk about your hotels, Ron, because the traditional definition of a Best Western hotel in the U.S. goes back to motel, it goes back to cinder block walls, basics, right? And yet you come outside the United States, you've got castles, you've got mansions. I mean, it's sort of like, and you're completely shocked in a very pleasant way. But when we talk about differentiating the brand, how are you doing that then?
Well, we've taken a strategic approach in a number of different directions. Our philosophy right now is that as many brands as what we need, as few as possible. So we're actually looking at where do we want the lineup of our brands to move to in the future. We purchased World Hotels, 150 luxury upper upscale hotels around the world, put that on top of Best Western to help change the perception of what the brand is today. And then as you spoke, what we have around the world is significantly different than the roadside hotels that we started back in 1946. I would tell you that in the States, it's significantly different. But what we're trying to do, and we're going to add, we're adding a brand to World Hotels in the next couple months here that will focus on glamping, glamorous camping. We know that that's an opportunity going forward. We're focused on wellness, and there will be something coming out as it relates to that. But at the same time, we're looking at the brands that are under the Best Western portfolio of Aiden hotels and different branded residences in the luxury and possibly mid-scale. So it's how do you evolve to meet the changing needs of the customer first and the developer? Because as Thomas said, if you don't have customers, then there's not a need for a product. We know that there's customers that want these different applications or development opportunities, especially as we get into Saudi Arabia, as we get into Vietnam, even Africa at this point in time. We're seeing a lot of different needs, and then here in South America, than what we typically are known for in North America.
Well, let's talk about South America. Is there a region right now that you never would have touched 3 years ago that you're now touching?
I think we're all going to say yes. I don't know, but you want to say yes
Well,
first?
I'm just saying, I mean, we're focused here. You know, we just last month opened up a Brazilian entity so we could do business differently and better here. So we've been in the market for quite some time, but you know, the opportunity is certainly here. We're 100% committed to it, and all of Latin America is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I would say El Salvador. El Salvador, it's a country in which it was on the radar maybe 5 years ago, and now it is. So, not sure if I'm not willing to invest in the past. It was in some way out of the map, and now it is there.
So the answer is yes. And why is it yes? Everybody knows that Accor historically is in Brazil since 45 years or 50 years, and we have 350-something hotels, etc. But let me give you a number. At the end of last year, for the first time, this is the first time, we signed 28 hotels. Normally, 80-90% would have been in Brazil, and the rest would have been Peru, Colombia, you know, just naming a couple of. So this year, 50% of the rooms are signed outside Brazil. So don't get me wrong, we're number one in Brazil, and we will continue to grow and stay number one in Brazil. But we are entering new markets where we might have been shy in the past. We recently signed 4 hotels in Peru, to give you an example. We signed and opened in the same year in Mexico, where historically we were not that present. We only had 39 hotels. So yes, we are looking at different markets outside Brazil, and to name them, Mexico is absolutely number one. You could say, but Thomas, everybody has been in Mexico. Well, you're asking if it's for us a new country? It is, because when you have 38 hotels, it's marginal for the Mexican market. And also Chile, Argentina, Peru, and Colombia, to name a couple. And we're starting to plant our flag as PME brands in the US, and that is quite historic because we've never done that.
For us, for example, I mean, we're present everywhere. I would just like to add that, for example, Argentina. We have not signed many deals in Argentina in the last 6-7 years, and
the reason being?
A difficult economic situation, right? And
not
no financing, and there's a lot of issues that the country was facing. But in the last 8 months, we have signed actually 4 projects in Argentina, which we have never done anything like that. So we're definitely seeing opportunities in Argentina. We're working with the local investors and local operators, because we see more of these local operators that are approved, and they're bringing deals to us. So it's purely franchise projects that we're working on in Argentina. Other markets, I mean, you touched El Salvador, which is, we've seen opportunities there. Another market which was very difficult because of the security issues, that the country was facing. And last year, we've actually signed a luxury deal in San Salvador, the capital city, a JW Marriott, which just maybe 2-3 years ago, nobody would even thought about that. And the Guyanas, I mean, we know that maybe 6-7 years ago, there was nothing in Guyana. Currently, we have actually 5 projects in the pipeline. We have a Marriott that is open there, doing phenomenally well, and 5 projects in the pipeline, in the construction. And similar thing we see actually in Suriname, believe it or not. We've signed a project in Suriname, and we see more opportunities there as well.
Name the capital.
Paramaribo.
There you go. Okay. Andres?
Oh, I was going to say, I echo the comments, and we have been asked, more and more, more often about Argentina. We actually left Argentina a couple of years back, and mainly because of the, let's call it geopolitical, complexity, but particularly it was very hard to get any money out of the country, and we decided to leave. I'm not sure if it was a smart decision, because I think in the long term you have to be there. So it's very encouraging to see all of the brands opening up contracts over there. And one of the things that we are getting very often is, hey, there are no operators. So for us, that's an interesting proposition. In many cases, brands are being either forced to operate themselves or bring other smaller operators into the mix just because of a lack of alternatives. So for that, it presents an opportunity. Similar is the case with Paraguay, for example, that we have been asked about it, and we never thought of that even a few months back, right? We're thinking of Mexico and we're thinking of expanding there, but that's more common. But again, Argentina, Paraguay, Salvador, we're already there, and also Guyana and Suriname. So it's very interesting. It's more and more often, and what we see for us, and I would say for other organizations that are, let's say, institutionalized, not only in the management, but in all of the ancillary services for the hotel industry, I think there are going to be some areas of potential expansion in these countries that are going to be very interesting in the next couple of years.
Historically, the concern that I always held or heard was that people couldn't get their money out of Argentina. And the funniest story ever, how many people here remember Braniff Airlines? Anybody? Okay, you're old enough to remember, okay. Braniff Airlines, their planes were full going down to Argentina, but they couldn't take their money out. So somebody came out with a brilliant idea. They would make sure that their plane went down to Argentina and overnighted there for at least 12 hours. Why? They went into the leather seat business. And while the plane was overnighting, they took all the cloth seats out, put leather seats on the plane, flew the seats out, and they were making money selling seats. It had nothing to do with passengers. That was their adaptation to not getting the money out. You guys can't do that. But now you have the assurances to go back?
Well, again, we get asked, and what we say is there's going to be scrutiny. We left a couple years back, but it's becoming more and more interesting for us, at least. I think Argentina, to the extent that there is not a lot of key money or investment required on the equity of the assets, it's going to be an easier pitch, at least for us, to go back and operate there. But I do think that long term, definitely Argentina is an important destination for us and for any hotel company.
Because the demand is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we again, that was a very difficult period for us because we couldn't get the money out of our properties in Argentina. So the receivables were just piling up, and what we've done, we've actually reached the agreement with the existing owners, who had the hotels in Argentina during that period of time, and we've agreed actually to accept local currency for those for those receivables. Not with all of the owners. It is risky, but we know that some of these owners want to grow with us. So we were very clear for which period of time we would actually accept that in order to really collect that money. And then, for all of the new projects that we're working on right now, there is a way to get the money out of Argentina. So we've been, obviously working with, with the local government as well as, obviously with investors, and we kind of, take them through the process because we've been working and we've been involved with the local government to be able to actually convert the pesos into the dollars so we can get the money out. And also, I think it's important to understand what brands we're developing. Like for example, if it is some of the luxury brands, I think it's a bit easier to actually collect the dollars and take the dollars out without converting.
There's always Bitcoin.
Yes.
Oh, you said yes.
Not for us yet.
Not for any of you, I think, right? Who's staying away from it. As we're running out of time here, as you try to adapt to this fast-changing landscape with demand differing, the money differing, and as Thomas said, the demographics differing, is there one thing that you haven't been able to adapt fast enough to in terms of your development?
So let me say there is one I wish we could accelerate, but that I'm proud of we're already doing, but it cannot go fast enough. And it's, sorry I have to provoke a little bit, but very often at these conventions, we hardly speak about our people. I mean, and at the end of the day, all this business can only be done with people. We don't talk too much about diversity, about equity, about inclusion. I was very happy to see a panel of 3 women who made it in the business, but there's so much more out there and so many more women who can do that. If there's one thing I think we can accelerate, and we're not there yet, it's integrating the community. We all have problems in finding labor. We know that. I'm proud to have a training center here in Sao Paulo, which has been training thousands and thousands of people. We recruited last year almost 10,000 people. Can you imagine what that is? And I think we have a lot to do. And I think here I'm talking to people from the government also, where we can work together. That our business is not only about great experience for our guests, but it gives great opportunity for our people. 65%, I like statistics, 65% of general managers in our company all started at the entry level. They were a waiter, they were a receptionist, they worked in housekeeping, you name it. So it is probably one of the only industries, if you're passionate, But unfortunately, you might not have had, like some of us, the possibility, for expensive studies and university. You can start in a hotel and you can become a general manager and who knows, a VP. So I would encourage a panel one day just talking about that.
I can't tell you how many general managers I've interviewed who told me they started as night auditors. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, but
Yeah, Gustavo.
sorry, my question on the other side of the coin is, that was the past, but which will be the future? Because now with the remote workers, hybrid way to work, our industry in some ways not sexy, because the people at the front desk need to be here, cannot work from home, need to work during holidays, during weekends. So that's one of the main challenges that I believe that we are facing as an industry for the future, how we are going to attract and retain new talent.
Now, Thomas, you're shaking your head.
Look, this couldn't be a good panel if sometimes we didn't agree, no? So I hear you, and you're probably right in many occasions, but let's not get caught by the problem, and let's find a solution. And 3-4 years ago, in this same panel, everybody thought that everybody would continue working at home. Sorry, my English, but this is utter, you know what I was going to say. Yeah, it's bullshit, okay? Today you see more, look in your own companies, look at your own head offices. You see more and more people coming back to work because we're a people business. Imagine having to stay. Imagine, we did it during the pandemic, 8 hours a day, behind a computer, sitting on a chair, in your house. First of all, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for your eyes, it's not healthy for your brain, and it's not healthy for your body. It's actually proven that standing up is more healthy than sitting down. So I think I get this. People work remote, which is great for our business because we've got so many square meters in our hotels, so they can work in our hotels. But we need to promote all the potential that our business has. Many of us are an example. We don't all start as COO or CEO or VP or whatever. In my case, I started as a receptionist, and I'm damn proud of it. So we just need to promote that a bit more.
This goes back to the staff issues from the pandemic, right? If you go to a restaurant in Italy, a cafe, the person who is serving you, it's his profession, not just his job, right? I think we all agree with that. And maybe his father did that before him. You go to a cafe in New York City, it's an out-of-work actor waiting for a call. So isn't it incumbent upon the industry to change the definition from a job to a profession?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And this is an industry of people taking care of people. So I started as a front desk clerk myself. So I get it. There is opportunity. We need to do a better job as an industry promoting it and supporting it. But I would say the other component of the industry we are lagging behind is technology. And I say that from a customer experience perspective, in that we have the information that we need to provide better experiences for guests. We just haven't connected all the dots to make it work. And that will help the staff that is at the hotels do a better job, make it easier for them to meet guest expectations or exceed guest expectations than the information that they have available to them today.
Well, we were talking about that this morning with Kamala when we talked about back of the house versus front of the house and technology and AI.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to touch upon, the technology. Technology is changing so rapidly that, it is hard to keep pace. And, if you look at, for example, our budget, one of the biggest ticket item on our budget is actually the technology, investment in the technology, changing our system, refreshing our systems. For example, what we want to do is really to help the guest experience. At the end of the day, when they go to the mobile app, that, they can do everything right there, that they can actually set, for example, request all of the in-room dining, whatever they need, in advance. Do the, out of 9,300 hotels, over 7,000 hotels already have the mobile check-in. So, it takes time.
But my question is, above a certain price point, don't you see a differentiation in guest expectation that they want a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
See, when I check into a hotel, if I see a kiosk, I run.
Yes, we, for example, it depends, because if you're talking to the millennials, they want everything, on the cell phone, right? They want the convenience of the cell phone. They do need an interaction, but I think, once they get to the hotel, whatever they can do in advance, they'll make sure that they do it in advance.
Yeah. So last comment, and I think, so you mentioned that you run when you see a kiosk. And Thomas mentioned, and I agree with both of you, that we love to go back to the office. But we should see what the Gen Z is thinking. Either going to run from a kiosk if you go to a front desk, or they do prefer that instead of going and talk to a person. Are they prefer to go to the office, or they do prefer to work from home? So that's the new generation. That's the tough part, to understand what the new generation are thinking and which will be their behavior in the future.
It's probably a different panel, but we have to work about the commoditization of travel. And that is, if you are only going to fly from New York to Chicago every Monday for the rest of your life, you can make love to the kiosk. It's going to be fine, right? But if you have a question and there's nobody there to answer it, you're going to go somewhere else. Andres.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of things real quick, because I think, both in the people side of things as well as in the technology, I think we operators are starting to have a major role and impact in the industry. You were mentioning, many people in the hotels have grown from front office positions all the way up to the C-suite. But it's changing, right? To the extent that the big brands become French brands as opposed to operators, we're going to have the bulk of the people, in our companies. And our responsibility there is going to be to grow, because people have been able to go up the ladder because there's growth, because there are new hotels, because there are opportunities. So people stay a lot in the companies within hospitality. Now it's going to be up to operators to consolidate, I think, in a way. Otherwise, growth and retention and people growing within the industry is going to be harder if they just have to move from, one or two or three hotel operators to the next. So I think we play a key role here. We see it at GHL. We have people, with 20, 30 years, a lot of them. Why? Because we grow. It's not because we're nice. Yeah, we're nice as well, but it's because we grow. So that's number one. I think, that's an important element. And the second one is IT, right? What we are faced from this side of the equation is we're faced with the IT stacks of everybody, right? And we have to see how we adapt to be able to leverage each of these guys' IT stack to have, one, a very good experience for the client, two, be able to sell the hotel well, and three, be able to generate the returns for the investors. So we have a key role to be able to leverage all of that technology and translate it into returns for the guests, for our people, and for the investors.
And don't forget your backup system,
Absolutely.
as we've seen all too often at Heathrow Airport. Bottom line is, it is at the end of the day about the conversation we're having right now. I'd like to thank our panel for that conversation. Thomas, Ron, Bojan, Gustavo, and Mr. Andreas at the end. Thank you so much.